Nope. Good evening. The February 13th, 2018 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education meeting is called to order. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 3313.15 of the Ohio Revised Code. Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Buckley?
Present.
Ms. Jisling?
Present.
Mrs. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Tuttle?
Here.
Mrs. Briner?
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to welcome everyone to the February 13th, 2018 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education. Prior to this evening, each board member has received for their review and consideration the agenda and materials associated with each agenda item for the board's approval via the district's paperless Board of Education agenda system, Board Docs. The public can access the agenda through the school district's website. The agenda is available through the district's website for public viewing the Sunday prior to the board meeting. Board members have the opportunity to call the superintendent and chief financial officer for information concerning agenda items and to request, if needed, additional information. There are two places on the agenda when the board entertains comments from the community. The first hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on agenda items only. The second hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on any subject, whether it is an item on the agenda or another issue. When addressing the board, please state your name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please address questions to the president. This meeting is being televised on a delayed basis and will be shown on Spectrum Cable, Channel 1026 in Mentor, and Channel 1025 in Mentor on the Lake. This meeting is also being videotaped and will be shown on our YouTube channel, Cardinal TV Mentor, Ohio. Please place your mobile telephones on silent mode during the meeting. And next up, we will have approval of minutes. We've got our organizational meeting, tax budget hearing, regular board meeting on January 9th, and special board meetings on January 11th, January 16th, January 17th, and January 22nd of 2018.
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes. And next, hearing of the public on agenda items only. Thank you. Next, superintendent's report and recommendations, Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I have the following recommendations listed under the consent agenda and recommend approval of items 5A1 through 5A5.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, at this time, I would like to invite Mr. Hammond and Mrs. Briner to recognize two Mentor High School students who recently earned the rank of Eagle Scouts.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Porter and Mr. Wilson. It's my pleasure to introduce two gentlemen from Mentor High School who have recently attained their rank of Eagle Scout. Our first young man, Mr. Christopher Hassick, unfortunately could not be with us this evening, led a project to fabricate two giant Adirondack chairs for Lake Metro Parks. His collaboration with the parks resulted in a plan to assess their needs, develop a design plan, and then go about fundraising efforts to support the project. The chairs serve as a great marketing tool for the parks and can be found at the Lake Metro Parks Farm Park in Kirtland, Ohio. Congratulations to Christopher. Next, I have Charlie here. This is Charles Nunez. He's currently a junior at Mentor High School. Charlie's Eagle Scout Service Project provided the leadership to design, fabricate, and construct a monument sign for the Fairport Heritage Community Garden in Fairport Harbor, Ohio. This was an extremely expensive project. Charlie was able to secure the funding via donations of money and supplies from local businesses. The members of Troop 64 also assisted in the manufacturing of the aluminum, steel, masonry, and granite sign. Congratulations, Charlie. Well done.
Thank you. Who can dance?
Congratulations, sorry about that.
Not mine. Maybe you can send him a note. I'd like to see big chairs. That's great.
Thank you. And Madam President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of the agreement with the Hiram House Camp for the 2018 outdoor education for our 6th grade students.
So moved?
Second? Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of Agenda Item C1 related to certified staff and C2 through C4, all related to human resource matters.
So moved?
Second? Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Thank you. This concludes my portion of tonight's agenda.
Thank you. The next item, we're going to move to the end of the agenda. And next, Chief Financial Officer report, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you. We have several items. Approval of the financial statements for the month of January. I'll note that the budget performance to date is tracking the actual budget expectations. The next big event will be the collection of the first half real estate property taxes. We'll receive an advance soon, and settlement either late March or early April, and then have a sense on our revenue for the year. The investment transactions show the impact of market movement over the past few weeks. This year, to-date earnings are about $300,000 more than they were a year ago at the same point in time, again reflecting an improving market from an investment standpoint, as well as the engagement of a different investment advisor to assist us. We remain conservative and cautious and kind of mid-range on maturities with that, but are still benefiting from recent events. The appropriation modifications, appropriations, and approval of certain invoices are routine items that we ask the board to approve.
So moved?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
And annually, our risk management program and insurance of risk has a renewal date of March 1st every year. We, for a number of years predating my arrival at the district, use Love Insurance Agency to assist us. We review both the marketplace as well as coverage and update based on any events that have occurred within the district, both claims-wise and things such as the construction of Paradigm or replacement of fleet vehicles. This year, leveraging the marketplace, we were actually able to reduce the premium by 9.4% or $33,483 and provided some increased coverage in cyber liability and crime coverages. So we're pleased that we were able to somewhat enhance coverages and at the same time have a 9.4% reduction. So I ask the board to approve the insurance rates and placement of insurance effective March 1st.
So moved.
Second?
And Dan, I want to express gratitude for the board and the community on a job well done on negotiating that decrease.
Thank you.
Very much
Yes.
appreciated.
That's excellent.
$33,000 is a lot.
You don't often see insurance rates go down.
No, no.
That's great, thank you,
Was there
Dan.
anything that precipitated that? Something, just a good job, well done and well negotiated?
Yes, primarily. Again,
Okay.
we do go to the marketplace and leverage, there's a cooperative, the Ohio Schools Plan, sponsored by the Cuyahoga County Educational Service Center that has over 100 participating districts. We do price that, but we also price independently. And, our claims history overall has been very positive. We did have a significant claim a year ago, as you may recall. But I think it's Jim Love and his agency do an outstanding job of representing his public sector and clients, and particularly our district.
Good.
Great.
I'm glad to see we're on the cyber liability, too. That's important with today's climate.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And it's always appreciated from the taxpayer's point of view that we find ways to save them money.
Yes.
So thanks
Yes,
to you.
very.
It adds up, definitely. Thank you. Okay, we have a first and a second. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes,
And that completes my items for this evening.
thank you, Mr.
Mary?
Wilson.
Oh,
I
Madam President.
apologize, Mr. Tuttle.
Go back to, well, I'd like to pass my time to Dan. He's got two subjects he'd like to talk about, and one subject is far more detailed than I have available. I prefer Dan to speak to that as well.
For legislative report?
Yes, for my legislative
I
report.
apologize, I skipped over
That's all
that. I
right.
was going to
No
come
problem.
back. Mr. Wilson,
Yes, I apologize. This is our one candidate.
do you want us to come back to that?
No, sorry, we'll call it. I very much apologize, but
That's
this
okay.
is for board action tonight.
Or did you want to call her back?
We'll do this real quick. This is relatively slow time legislatively as far as formal actions at the state level. It's a little more interesting at the national level. Tom Tuttle and I were able to attend a legislative breakfast sponsored by the Lake County Development Corporation earlier this week. And one of the speakers there was Representative John Rogers from Mentor-on-the-Lake, who has been an advocate of public education in general and specifically on issues of great impact on us. There's legislation that was sponsored and is actually, I believe, out of the House now and going to the Senate that would greatly restrict a Board of Education's ability to file Board of Revision complaints to ask the values be set to recent sales. And again, in our district, we only do this on non-residential properties, or to file counter complaint if a property owner asks for a decrease. We want to ensure that it's based on an appraised value and current market conditions. The Board of Education authorizes me to take the lead on that with our Brenza McIntyre and Seed law firm that specializes in this area at the organizational meeting, and then it's handled administratively. We provide regular updates to the board and have shown great success in protecting current value and adjusting values to ensure a fairness for all taxpayers. This recent legislation would create new barriers to being able to do that by requiring a Board of Education to take separate votes on every individual parcel of property considered for a change in value at the Board of Revision or State Board of Tax Appeals. We file hundreds of complaints a year, and Representative Rogers is opposing this as an unnecessary new burden. Just today, I attended the annual Lake County Budget Commission meeting and met with our county auditor about this legislation, who is also very concerned that the Board of Revision's made up of the county auditor, the county prosecutor, and the county treasurer, and they do not have the resources to manage a significant increase in the paperwork to do what we've always done. So this is legislation that we continue to monitor. I think I've reported in my board updates before, but there's a push to try to move that along here late winter, and we will continue to monitor that. just today in one of our national news clips, and I'll include it in the Friday update, was an early analysis on the proposed new federal budget that would reduce much of our federal funding by 5% beginning in fiscal year 18-19. We're beginning to do a quick assessment of the impact on that. We get several $1 million a year on federal funding, primarily for special needs students and economically disadvantaged students, and we will be monitoring that bill, obviously, and engaging our congressman and U.S. Senator asking for understanding on the impact to us locally. So that's kind of new news that just came across today in the national news clips, and one, again, will provide a deeper update. So for what's supposed to be a quiet season, there's a couple significant things going on.
Thanks, Dan. Let me add something to the real estate taxes and the appeal process. A few years back, I had experience working for a major corporation, and what I learned then regarding this appeal process on real estate taxes, it becomes a game. One party wins, one party loses temporarily. The party who loses appeals it again, and typically what we experienced where I worked and what I came to know from when the bounce goes in the favor, what they want to do, the property owners, business primarily, it's usually business and big money's involved, they get their tax reduced. So they get a break for about a year, year and a half. Then the schools come back and say, no, that's not right. In the meantime, property owners have not paid their fair share, so they go down. Then we get them back up again when we appeal. So it's a game until they're finally satisfied, but I can tell you most are typically not satisfied. I could be wrong, Dan, but that was my experience in the
very much so.
80s and 90s. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
And for the state to now say, no, you need a resolution for all 100 or 150 or 200, that puts the burden on us to work a whole lot harder to appeal, when in fact we're going against, if we're going against 200 property owners or something like that, that's one appeal, maybe two appeals. In the meantime, we have to fight back on 200. So you can see the importance of that argument. And John Rogers, I'm sure you all know it, he is on our side as public education. So thank you. Dan, that was really enlightening. Thank you for explaining it.
Yes.
And, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, before we move on, is there anything else I missed?
No, you're fine.
Thank you. All right, next item is any unfinished business. No? Any new business?
Madam President, I would like to propose that the board entertain the development of a policy requiring the yearly update of the strategic plan, the capital improvement and technology plans, and ask that Mr. Porter and Mr. Wilson draft such a policy for our consideration.
So the next step would be for Mr. Porter and Mr. Wilson to work on the policy that you stated, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If Any discussion?
What we'll do is see if there's an existing policy that perhaps could be revised, or if it would be a new policy. But I think I understand the intent there.
All right, any other questions on that? Thank you, Mr. Buckley. We'll wait for a follow-up on that then. Thank you. All right, any other new business? Okay. Next, hearing of the public on any item. None? All right, the board will be going into executive session to discuss the employment and compensation of public employees, and the board may be voting after. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
All right, the board is back in session. Oh, we're going to go back to the item that we pushed to the end of the agenda. So the board would like to announce that after a committee was formed, we would like to appoint 2 Mentor Public Library trustees. We would like to thank all that submitted their applications and came in for interviews. We had some wonderful applicants, and we have received 2 people who have accepted to be on the Library Board of Trustees. We have Christine Henninger, who is going to accept the unexpired term, which would expire December 2019, and Sue Wilkowski, who is accepting the new 7-year term, which will expire December 2024. Again, thank you to the group who helped out with the committee and to those who applied.
And we will need a motion on that in a second, please.
Okay? And I will entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes. Thank you. And then the last item, did you want to present that?
Sure. Good evening again. At this time, I am recommending approval of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Mentor Teachers Association that outlines, we'll look at the first one, district restructuring and MTA staffing for the 2018-2019 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Thank you to both the MTA and the district team to put together such a well-coordinated plan to try to get everybody in place for next year and minimize job loss.
I would agree with that. Thank you, Jenny. And I would like to add, it sounds like things are moving along. So again, thank you to everyone for their cooperation. Please, do we have a motion?
Yes, we have a motion and a second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
And at this time, I'm recommending approval of the second one, the Memorandum of Understanding that outlines the modifications to the contract associated with supplemental contracts.
So moved.
Second. I'd like to add also to this that it's a fine demonstration of coming together. It's not a politicized we-they argument, but one coming together as a unit in support of the community, the teachers, the schools, the children, the community. Well done to both MCE, MTA, and the administration to work through this. My compliments, sincere compliments.
Anything else? Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes. We're adjourned.